Reporters thought Elvis would dodge every question about Ann-Margret that afternoon in Vegas. But instead of avoiding the rumors, he walked up to the microphones and told them something no one on that press line expected. By the time he finished, you could hear cameras shaking in stunned silence. Las Vegas Hilton, July 29, 1972. Late afternoon heat pressed against the glass doors as fans crowded the entrance, waving ticket stubs from the night before. Inside, the hotel's ballroom-turned-press hall felt even hotter. Cigarette smoke curled under the yellow lights, and the low hum of gossip floated between rows of folding chairs. A tape recorder clicked, then clicked again as someone tested it. Another reporter coughed. Someone whispered, "He's running a little late." The air felt tight, as if the room knew something was coming. 45 reporters had packed the hall, most of them holding notepads already open to one name, Ann-Margret. And everyone there wanted Elvis to slip, just once. Joe Esposito stood near the curtain, adjusting his collar, watching the doors like a guard dog. "Get ready," he muttered to a photographer next to him. "He's in a serious mood today." The photographer only nodded. He could hear the crowd outside chanting in waves. "Elvis, Ann-Margret, Elvis, Ann-Margret." Their voices leaked faintly through the walls, like distant thunder. Inside the ballroom, flashbulbs fired even before Elvis arrived. The floor trembled when a group rushed toward the front to secure their spots. A woman from an LA paper tightened her grip on her Sony TC-110 recorder. "If anyone asks about the engagement rumor," she whispered, "we'll finally get the truth today." But what truth were they expecting? And why did everyone assume Elvis would either lie or lose his temper? A door clicked open behind the curtain. The room fell silent. Elvis stepped into the lights wearing a simple black shirt, his white Hilton cape folded loosely over one arm. Sweat glimmered at the edge of his sideburns. Not from nerves, but from the heat and the fast walk from backstage. His eyes scanned the room quickly, then softened when he spotted a familiar AP reporter, Linda Marshall, who had covered him since '69. He gave a small nod. Cameras snapped instantly. The mic crackled as he approached the podium. Someone in the back whispered, "He looks calm, too calm." The truth was, Elvis had heard every rumor, every headline, every whisper that turned into a story, then grew into something bigger than both him and Ann-Margret. They had stopped being people to the world. They had become characters. And today, he had to decide whether to stay silent or finally say what he had held in for years. Outside, fans roared again, so loud the walls vibrated. Elvis paused and listened for a moment. His fingers tightened around the edge of the podium, just slightly. A small motion, but the front row caught it. What would you do if thousands demanded answers about the most private corner of your life? Would you stay quiet, or would you speak? A flash went off. Then another. Dozens of lenses locked onto his face. Elvis took a breath that shook the microphone stand. Then he opened his mouth to speak. But the moment he opened with his first sentence, the room froze. The room was so quiet after Elvis's first line that you could hear the soft whir of a tape recorder spinning near the front. Reporters leaned forward as if the floor itself might move. The air felt heavier now, thicker, like everyone sensed that this press conference would not be like the others. Elvis adjusted the microphone. A flash exploded. Another. The sound bounced around the ballroom like tiny fireworks. He hadn't even finished his second sentence when it happened. A chair screeched sharply against the floor. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune, Mike Halper, shot to his feet, pushing past two other journalists. His voice cut through the room like a blade. "Are you and Ann-Margret secretly engaged?" The words slammed into the silence. Gasps. Real ones. From grown adults who had covered politics, scandals, breakups, even war stories. Cameras jerked upwards. A boom mic trembled above the first row. Linda Marshall from the AP lowered her recorder for the first time since Elvis walked in. Outside in the hallway, the crowd's chanting faded abruptly, almost as if even they sensed something had shifted. Elvis looked at Mike Halper for a long second. Not angry, not shocked, just disappointed. A kind of disappointment that feels louder than a shout. Joe Esposito took a step forward, instinctively ready to shut this down. The colonel moved too, leaning in as if to whisper instructions into Elvis's ear. But Elvis raised one hand, small gesture, steady, final. He would handle this himself. The cameras clicked faster, like nervous breathing. For a moment Elvis didn't speak. His jaw tightened slightly. His fingers brushed the folded cape on the podium. His eyes held that reporter's stare without blinking. What does a person do when the world demands answers to a question that was never theirs to ask? What truth belongs to the public? And what truth belongs to the heart? The room held its breath. Elvis inhaled slowly through his nose. Then he set both hands on the podium and leaned forward just a little. You know, he began, voice calm. There's a difference between a rumor and a story. And there's a difference between a story and someone's life. Somewhere in the back, a camera strap snapped in the reporter's shaky hands. Halper didn't sit. He waited, eyes wide, pencil frozen over his notebook. Everyone else watched Elvis like he was about to reveal the final line of a mystery they'd chased for years. But Elvis didn't rush. He looked down for a moment, then back up, as if deciding how much truth to offer the world. The colonel's face tightened. He knew Elvis was about to go off script. Elvis? Someone whispered under their breath. Don't do this. Another mic crackled. The air conditioner kicked on with a low rumble. The tension became almost physical, wrapping around the room like a band pulled too tight. Then Elvis's expression changed, subtle but undeniable. Something softened. Something opened. He wasn't dodging. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't embarrassed. He was ready. He looked directly at Mike Halper. And in a voice softer than anyone expected, he began to answer the question. I think, he said slowly, you all deserve to hear something I've never said out loud before. Every reporter froze. Every camera stopped shaking. Even the crowd outside quieted for a moment, sensing the shift through the thin ballroom walls. Then Elvis said something no reporter had ever heard him admit before. For a moment, Elvis didn't look like a superstar under hotel lights. He looked like a man carrying years of stories the world never heard. The ballroom was silent except for the faint tape hiss from Linda Marshall's recorder near the front row. Elvis lifted his head, and he began. You know, people have been writing about me and since 1964, he said softly. Some of it funny, some of it crazy, some of it just plain made up. A few reporters scribbled quickly. Others didn't move, terrified to miss a single word. The rumor about the so-called secret rivalry between them had fueled magazines for years, and now Elvis was speaking about it freely. He leaned on the podium, relaxing his shoulders a little. Most folks forget something, he continued. We worked together. We danced. We sang. We filmed long days. We saw each other at our tiredest and our best. The simplicity of his tone made the room lean closer. He wasn't bragging. He wasn't dramatic. He was honest. Mike Halper, the same reporter who'd thrown the explosive question, slowly lowered himself back into his chair. He looked dazed, as if he didn't know what he had started. Elvis's voice stayed calm, but beneath it, emotion simmered like a quiet fire. You know what the papers loved? He said. They loved stories about jealousy. They loved saying we were fighting for attention. He shook his head, eyes warm but firm. There was never a fight. She never wanted what wasn't hers. And I never wanted what wasn't mine. A short sentence dropped like a stone. She deserved more respect than the world gave her. The room stiffened. Even the colonel's brows rose slightly. Elvis continued, and wasn't just a co-star. She wasn't a headline. She was one of the hardest working people I ever met. His voice softened even more. She'd rehearse till her feet hurt. She'd redo a dance take just because she wanted it perfect. Linda Marshall whispered to the reporter beside her. He's defending her. Really defending her. And he was. The stakes grew with each word. He could confirm the romance. He could deny it. He could choose silence. Any path could ignite tomorrow's newspapers. What would you do if the truth could protect someone, but could also create new pain elsewhere? Would you speak? Would you hold back? Elvis's breath slowed. He scanned the sea of faces. Faces hungry for headlines, not humanity. "You all want to know what happened between us," he said. "But some bonds aren't simple." He smiled sadly. "Some bonds don't fit into a neat little box. And the world doesn't like things it can't label." A ripple moved across the room. The mood changed. Reporters who came in ready to twist anything he said were now listening like children hearing a bedtime truth for the first time. A pattern breaker slipped out of his mouth. "You all were chasing the wrong story." Pens froze. He continued, "You thought the big question was whether we dated, or fought, or were jealous of each other." Elvis let a small laugh escape, dry, knowing. "No. The real story was always the respect between us." The crowd outside began chanting again, muffled by the walls. "Elvis, Ann-Margret." The sound rolled through the ballroom like distant thunder, shaking the atmosphere. Elvis glanced toward the doors, almost smiling. "You hear that?" he asked. "People still talk about us like we were a movie that never ended." He paused, looked down, looked back up. "But the truth is, the only reason our friendship survived everything, every rumor, every picture, every headline, was because of one thing." The entire room leaned forward at once. Cameras hovered mid-air. Notebooks froze. Breath held. Then he revealed the real reason their bond survived every rumor. The room felt like it was tilting. Reporters sat frozen, their pens still hovering above their notebooks, waiting for Elvis to finish the sentence he had left hanging in the air. The tape, recorders on the front table spun softly, capturing every breath, every shift of weight, every whisper of fabric. Elvis rested both hands on the podium. He looked down. He looked up again. And then he told them, "The only reason any of it survived," he said slowly, "was trust." The word echoed. Not scandal, not romance, not rumors. Trust. Some reporters blinked, unsure they heard him right. Elvis continued, "People thought we were hiding things. People thought we were lying. But the truth is, you can only hide something if you think it's wrong. And there was nothing wrong about caring for someone who cared for you." A camera click shattered the silence. Elvis didn't flinch. He breathed out, the kind of breath a man takes when he finally allows himself to say something he has carried for too long. "You all wrote stories about jealousy," he said, "but and never once tried to outshine me. Never once." His voice thickened slightly. "If anything, she pushed me to shine brighter." A soft wave moved through the room, the kind that only happens when people hear something real. Joe Esposito looked stunned. The colonel looked terrified. But Elvis kept going. "You all saw the movie magic," he said. "What you didn't see were the hours between takes. The talks, the quiet moments, the understanding." He paused. Then a short, sharp line. "We had something the cameras couldn't catch." The room stiffened. The colonel tried to step closer, but Elvis shifted slightly to block him. "Elvis," the colonel whispered. Elvis ignored him. He wasn't speaking for the reporters anymore. He wasn't speaking for the headlines. He was speaking for himself and for Ann-Margret. "She was there," he said softly, "when I was tired, when I was unsure, when I felt like everything around me was getting too loud." He tapped the podium gently. She listened. More flashes, more shuffling, but no one dared interrupt. "What would you do?" he asked quietly. "If someone stood by you when the whole world expected them to walk away, would you forget that? Would you pretend it didn't matter?" The room didn't move. Even the hallway crowd outside had gone strangely quiet, as if the walls themselves were listening. Elvis swallowed. The mic picked up the soft sound. Then he delivered the next piece of truth. "There were times," he admitted, "when I pushed people away, when I was scared of breaking something good, when fame made everything feel bigger than it really was." His voice cracked just a little. "But Anne, she never held it against me." Reporters lowered their cameras. Some stopped recording altogether. The story they came for was not the story they were getting. The turning point arrived in a whisper. "You all want to know if we were in love," he said gently. But love isn't always the headline version. Sometimes it's respect. Sometimes it's timing. Sometimes it's knowing someone sees the real you, even when the world only sees the stage version. He leaned closer to the microphone. Short bursts. Raw. Honest. She cared for me. I cared for her. And that was enough. Linda Marshall's eyes watered. She covered it by adjusting her glasses. Elvis reached for the cape on the podium and ran his thumb across the edge, like a grounding ritual. And then came the moment no one expected. His voice softened until it was barely more than breath. And deserved kindness, he said. So I'm giving her mine today. He looked straight ahead, eyes shining. Then he said her name. Soft, unprotected, real. And the sound of it cracked the air like a fault line opening across the room. And when he said her name, his voice cracked. When Elvis said her name, the room didn't just go silent. It softened, like the air itself understood the weight of what he'd finally admitted. Reporters who had come in ready to pounce now sat with lowered shoulders. Pens slowed. Cameras eased downward. Even the hotel lights seemed warmer, as if the ballroom itself shifted from interrogation arena to something closer to a church. Elvis took another breath, calmer now, as if saying her name out loud had released a locked door inside him. You have to understand something, he said quietly. People think rumors are harmless, but they can hurt good people. Real people. The sentence floated across the room like smoke. Linda Marshall from the AP stopped her recorder completely. She wasn't thinking about headlines anymore. She was thinking about the way Elvis's voice had cracked. A sound she knew wasn't rehearsed, or staged, or meant to manipulate. Mike Halper, the reporter who had thrown the first spark, swallowed hard. His pencil hovered, motionless. He didn't dare interrupt again. Elvis looked down at the podium. His fingers tapped the wood, gentle, steady, like he was grounding himself through touch. She was kind, he said. More kind than most people knew. His voice thickened. And when I was going through some heavy times, she didn't turn away. She didn't chase the cameras. She didn't want anything from me. A short burst. Simple, honest. She was just there. You could feel the shift. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was confession. It was gratitude. It was closure. Outside the ballroom doors, the crowd kept chanting faintly, but the sound felt farther now, like another world. For the people inside, time had slowed. What would you do? Elvis asked softly. If the world twisted one of the healthiest friendships you ever had, would you fight the rumor? Or would you protect the person instead? The reflective questions hung in the lights. A photographer lowered his camera. I never thought he'd talk like this, he whispered. Elvis continued. You all wanted a scandal, but she gave me something much better than a scandal. He smiled, small and real. She gave me support when I needed it the most. He looked up at the room, at the reporters, at the lights, at the sea of faces waiting for more. Then a pattern breaker slipped out of him. You all owe her an apology. The shock hit instantly. A few reporters gasped. Joe Esposito blinked like he'd misheard. But Elvis didn't take the words back. She carried the weight of stories she never asked for, he said. And she did it with more grace than any of us deserved. He wasn't angry. He wasn't ashamed. He was freeing something, maybe himself, maybe her, maybe both. The colonel, usually bold, took a hesitant step forward. Elvis, he whispered urgently, we should wrap this up. But Elvis didn't move. He wasn't finished. He looked back out at the crowd of reporters, people who had followed him for years, some with admiration, some with hunger, some with both. And never asked me to defend her, he said. But I am. A long pause followed. Nobody breathed. Elvis stepped back slightly from the microphone. His shoulders eased. This was no longer a press conference. It was a moment, a rare, vulnerable human moment. And just as the room finally began to absorb it, then something happened that Elvis did not expect. The unexpected moment hit before Elvis even stepped away from the podium. A reporter in the second row, someone who had covered him for nearly a decade, slowly stood, eyes lowered, voice shaky. Mr. Presley, she said softly. I think we might have judged her unfairly. The room froze again. Not from tension this time, but from humility. A few others nodded. One man closed his notebook entirely, as if the story he came for no longer mattered. Elvis blinked, surprised. Reporters apologizing. That never happened in Las Vegas. But it was happening now. He gave a small nod, gentle, grateful, and finally stepped back from the podium. The cameras didn't attack him this time. They followed him with a strange kind of reverence, like they had just witnessed something rare. When Elvis walked through the ballroom doors, the hallway crowd erupted. Cheers bounced off the walls. Fans held scarves, album covers, ticket stubs. Someone shouted Ann-Margret's name, and the chant spread like a spark. Ann-Margret! Ann-Margret! Elvis looked stunned for a second. Then he gave a soft smile. It was as if the audience, those who had never met her, were thanking her too. Hours later, the newspapers hit the streets up and down the strip. Hotel lobbies buzzed. Taxi drivers talked. Dealers whispered across blackjack tables. Nearly every headline said the same thing. Elvis defends Ann-Margret. His most honest moment. A press room left in silence. No scandal. No rumors. Just truth. Mike Halper, the reporter who fired the first question, submitted a surprisingly gentle piece to the Tribune. Even Linda Marshall's AP wire read differently that night. More human than usual, as if she couldn't bring herself to twist a single line. Across town, inside her suite at the Riviera, Ann-Margret read the morning papers herself. She didn't call the press. She didn't make a statement. She didn't defend herself or correct anything. Instead, she took out a small card, wrote a short message in her neat handwriting, slid it into an envelope, and sent it to the Hilton addressed simply. E. Presley, personal. Crew members later said the note was soft, warm, grateful. Elvis kept it tucked inside his jacket pocket for months, like a quiet reminder of the moment the world finally saw their bond through the right lens. Decades later, fans still talk about that day. Old fan clubs in Memphis mention it in newsletters. Bootleg recordings of the ballroom hum circulate online. A framed clipping from that press conference supposedly hung in Elvis's Graceland office, right above the desk where he kept his favorite keepsakes. Why do certain truths echo longer than the rumors that created them? Why does a single honest moment ripple through years like a stone thrown into still water? For Elvis and Ann-Margret, this press conference became more than a headline. It became part of their legend. And the memory of that day, the softness, the honesty, the crack in Elvis's voice, would return during one of his final interviews. Years later, in one of his final long-form interviews, a journalist asked Elvis a quiet question. Is there anything you wish people understood about your relationships? The real ones? Elvis didn't answer right away. He just looked down at the table, gently tapping a folded piece of paper he kept tucked in his wallet. A paper that crew members believed was Ann-Margret's handwritten note from that day in Vegas. The room in that interview studio was dim. No flashing cameras. No crowd outside. No reporters shouting questions. Just a man, older now, carrying the weight and wisdom of everything fame had given and taken. After a long pause, he finally spoke. People think fame makes you bigger, he said softly. But what it really does is make your mistakes louder. And it makes good people around you vulnerable to things they never asked for. The interviewer leaned in. The mic hummed quietly. You could almost hear the memory opening inside him. That day in Las Vegas, Elvis continued, wasn't about defending myself. It was about protecting someone who showed me kindness when the world wasn't so kind to me. A pattern breaker slipped from his lips. Kindness stays. Rumors don't. Simple. True. Final. He sat back in his chair, eyes soft, as if replaying the ballroom in his mind. The smoke, the lights, the sea of faces waiting to twist or twist again. And then the moment the room changed, the moment he changed it. What would you do? Elvis asked quietly. If someone helped you without asking for anything in return, would you forget it? Or would you honor it? The interviewer didn't respond. He didn't have to. Elvis continued. People talk about love like it's one thing, one shape, one story. But love shows up in all kinds of ways. Respect, loyalty, timing. His fingers pressed gently against the note in his wallet. Sometimes love is choosing to stay silent, and sometimes love is choosing to speak. The lights above him buzzed gently, as if agreeing. Outside the studio, fans gathered behind the glass windows. Some held posters, old movie stills from Viva Las Vegas. Some carried faded ticket stubs. A few held small plaques made by fan clubs that read, "The truth matters. Loyalty matters more." Elvis looked toward them, smiled faintly, then returned his gaze to the interviewer. "People think Ann and I were trying to hide something," he said. "But we weren't hiding. We were protecting something good." A long pause stretched between them. He finished with a line that felt like a sigh, a closure, a gentle end to a story that had followed him for decades. "I just hope people remember the truth, not the rumors." That was it. No dramatic twist. No confession wrapped in scandal. Just a final, simple truth from a man who had lived inside the spotlight and still chose to show grace when he could have chosen silence. And Elvis hoped the world would finally let the rumors rest. If the story moved you, share it with someone who still believes loyalty matters. Legends aren't remembered for the rumors. They're remembered for the moments they chose truth over noise. If you were there that day in Vegas, what would you have remembered most?